In today's video, I want to talk to you about how often should you run as an older endurance runner? What is the sweet spot? This comes up a lot in conversations with potential runners that I'm going to coach. They've got a goal and they're like, how often should I run? They're either coming from a place of fear because they've come back from injury and they're not quite sure what to do, or they want to go for a goal, but how much is enough? I'm going to share my framework on how you can get the best balance. If you enjoy this video, I think you might enjoy my new book called The Dead Zone Fix, and it looks at why older endurance runners get stuck, and it's not primarily age. If you're interested, details are below this video. Let's crack on with the video and see how we can help you analyze how much is just about the right amount to run each week, each month, and ultimately each year. What we have is a Goldilocks problem, but without the three bears. We've got the scenario of runners are going to be fear-based quite often and do too little, and they won't progress. More common is runners doing too much, especially us older runners, and we get injured. And we're looking for that just right, as I said right at the beginning of the video. What is just right? And how do we actually, know that? So let's look at the risks of too much versus too little. Too much, as I said earlier, is where I see most older endurance runners. The trouble is, we've got 50, 60, 70 plus year old bodies in our brains. We're still thinking like we're 25 or 30. And we have this conflict going on between our minds and our bodies. The fact is, we're fighting a reality. If we fight that reality, we will lose. When runners experience that, they see that reality as just purely down to age. As I say in my new book, that's what it feels like. And age, of course, is a reality. But the reality with doing too much, with burnout, injuries, and constant fatigue, is normally around our habits that we formed over years and we haven't adapted or changed. Now, if that's of interest, check out the book below. But that is very much down to how much and how we run, which I'm going to come to in a minute. Too little is less, but it's normally fear-based, people coming back from injury. You don't know how to do enough. It's a bit like when you get an operation, a hip operation or something like that, and someone says, right, do some physio, and they give you a leaflet. I've had people come into my salon who've had hip operations and they're older, and they're going, well, should it hurt that much? And my father-in-law's just had a knee operation, and my wife's been saying to him, you've got to move your leg, Dad. Should there be discomfort? So that fear in running terms can sometimes mean that we lose aerobic base, we have slower progress, and of course it's very hard to stay consistent. So what should we actually do? The first step is develop a baseline. I do this a lot with runners I coach. It's quite simple, but a lot of runners don't do it. Over the last 3 months, how much have you run? So what kilometers, miles have you run in that 3 months? Have you had any injuries or discomfort in that 3 months? What has the experience been over that 3 months of doing that mileage or kilometers? How have you felt? Have you enjoyed it? Has it been stressful? Have you had trouble fitting it into your lifestyle, which we'll come to in a moment? What's the experience been? What's the longest run? If you're doing, say, longer runs, what's your longest run been in the last 3 months? Now, all this is pretty simple stuff, but you've got to set a baseline before you can move from it. If you've been running 2 days a week and you've done a certain amount of mileage in that time, how has that felt? Have you had any injuries? What is your longest run in that 3 months of running? That way, you can discover what your baseline is. That's your starting point. So you've got your baseline for the last 3 months. Now let's look at where you want to go. So begin with the end in mind. And it will depend on how far the end is. I always say with runners, unless they're going to retire, there is no end. They're only commas. A race is only a comma. Or if it is a full stop, you've got another paragraph. Because runners are always going on to the next thing. But give yourself a tangible goal. This doesn't have to be a race. It could be, I just want my running to be more enjoyable. I just want to get out running more regularly. Whatever the goal is for the next 3 to 6 months, what do you want to achieve? And when do you want to achieve it? If you've done the first part and looked at where you've been the last 3 months and where you want to go, there should be a gap. That's the training gap between, because really all a training plan is, or training, is a vehicle to take you from where you are now to where you want to go. Basically, a training plan is a way of solving a problem. It's like a map taken from a man that's got the world's worst sense of direction. When I get in a car and my wife's sitting there, it's either the GPS or my wife that are telling me where to go. They are my guides. They are the map. But I've got a goal in mind. I know where I want to go. And I know from the past where I've been. So bringing those two together is the key element. So what could possibly go wrong? You now know what you've done over the last 3 months or 6 months. You know the mileage. You know how many days a week you've run. You know your longest run. You've got a good idea. You've got clear on where you want to go. It might be a subjective, objective goal. And now there's gap. What could possibly go wrong? I call it dissatisfaction gap. If you don't take into account where you've come from, specifically, and you just get outcome focused, there will be a dissatisfaction gap when you get to your race goal. In simple terms, let's say that I want to run a 100k ultra and I'm presently running 2 days a week. That's what I've done for the last 3 months. And I want to run a 100k ultra in 6 months. Is that impossible? No. Is it probable? Probably not. But the dissatisfaction gap is massive. What I mean by that, the gap between what you want and what is likely is big. It's not impossible. I don't want anybody shouting me down, telling about their granny that once did it, who went up Mount Everest without oxygen and whistled all the way. I know there's always those outliers, but what we're talking about here is across the board. And the dissatisfaction gap is if you haven't taken into account your past, the last 3 months, not when you did what you did when you're 21, what you've done in the last 3 months and your outcome, if the gap's too big from where you are now, then you're going to be unhappy. Now, what's this got to do with how many days a week you run? Well, I could tell you, yes, older runners should run 3 days a week. But if you want to do an ultra, you probably might have to run more than 3 days a week. But I've trained people to run ultras in 3 days a week. So what's the variable? You've got to become aware of the dissatisfaction gap. You've got to look at how big the goal is between where you are now and where you want to go and the time frame that you're giving yourself. If that is too out of kilter, the dissatisfaction gap is going to be massive. You're going to get to your goal and you go, what was that all about? So to shrink the dissatisfaction gap, you have to be very realistic where you are. And then you may have to utilize stepping stone goals. So if it's a 100k ultra and that dissatisfaction gap seems too massive, maybe some stepping stone goals along the way. Maybe a marathon, maybe where it will depend where you've started, of course, but you may need to put in some stepping stone goals along the way to close the potential for the dissatisfaction gap. Another factor to consider is intensity and duration. I could get somebody come to me and go, Lee, I only run 3 days a week. I'm absolutely battered if I run 3 days a week. I get injuries. Then we analyze their running, a bit like what I've gone through with you on this video. And they're doing all their running at some low level, mid level, or high tempo, really. The dead zone, which is what the book's about. Sorry about the plug. It's quick though, not bad. And all their running is in what I call the dead zone. So it's not what they're doing, it's how they're doing it. Potentially, they could run 4 days. They might be able to run 5 days if they got the duration intensities right. I'm always reminded of the quote from Eric Morecambe. I don't know if you remember Eric Morecambe from Morecambe and Wise. And he had a famous sketch with Andre Previn. And he was playing the music. And of course, the joke was Eric Morecambe couldn't play the piano. And Andre Previn was being very straight-faced. At one point, Andre Previn gets so fed up with Eric Morecambe, he says you're not playing the right note or something like that. Eric Morecambe looks at him, and he was one of my favourite comedians, deadpan. He says, I'm playing all the right notes, but not particularly in the right order. When I see runners come to me for coaching or advice, and we look at their plan, it reminds me really of that. I'm playing all the right notes, but not particularly in the right order. If you're looking at how many days you should run, that may be something for you to look at. Is you've got your goal, you've got what you've done the last 3 months, you've got your goal, and you're like, now, what notes am I going to play each week? What intensities and durations to work on? What you've done in the last 3 months will give you a good clue. Your recoveries from those runs will give you a good clue. All these things will be clues. And I say to my runners, you've got to become a detective, really curious. And if you want to self-coach, if you think, I'm a lone wolf, Lee, I don't need a coach. No one needs a coach, by the way. If you want one, but you don't have to have one. But if you're going to coach yourself, you've got to become curious about the inputs that you have and the outputs that you get. Durations are really key because they are the notes of the masterpiece you're trying to compose, which is the plan that you've got. You got your plan, you got all the notes like those conductors that put it up. Right. They go, what's he going to do? What intensity does he want this at? So, I want that quiet, I want that noisy, I want that a little bit in the middle. You are your own conductor if you're coaching yourself. So if you want to run more days, or you think you're going to need to for your goal, look at your intensities and durations of your runs and look at the feedback loop you've had over the last 3 months. And that will be a good clue for you. And finally, life and stuff. Stress is stress. I've had runners do strength workouts and they're like, strength training is really good for you, Lee. And I look at their strength workout and I think there must be a Rocky montage in the background playing. Dun, dun, dun. And then at the end of their workout, they must run up the steps and go. Why that matters about the amount of days you run is if you've got a strength workout like that, you're going to take longer to recover. If you've got a lot of stress in your life, stress is stress. I don't want to be too generically sexist here, but if you're a guy, you're probably really good at putting things in little boxes. Now, I don't want to break it to you, but your wife or your significant other has probably been telling you this for a few years now. There is only life. Those little boxes we put in, even something called running zones, they're just constructs up here. This is a physical pen. This actually exists. Running zones, the boxes we put mentally don't exist. Stress is stress. If you've got stress at work, it's going to impact your running. If you've got a lot of stress in your running, it may even impact your work. If your workouts are too stressful, like I said earlier about duration, intensity, that stress is going to impact. And that's going to have to roll into how many days a week you run as well. It's all very well me saying to my runners, yeah, so for this workout, you need to run 5 days a week. And you're like, how many days a week do you work? So I work 5 days a week and I work 12 hours. And you're like, oh, right. Okay. And I'm stressed out most of the time. Then we got to look at quality over quantity. You've got to make that decision. I know some of you may be frustrated by this video because you may have been looking for the right chaps. You've got to run 55, 3 days a week, 62. And it's ridiculous because at the end of the day, you're all going to be different. What I can give you is the framework to self-coach, to be curious, to look at this stuff and work with it. Okay, good people, that is it. If you've got to the end, well done. Give yourself a pat on the back. Good stuff. I got to the end. I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. No, seriously, thank you for watching the video. I know when I started to look at this video, it was like, do I do it black and white? No, because that's not how I work with my runners. It's not being honest with you. Hopefully it's giving you a structure for freedom so that you can look at how often you're running now, how often you might need or want to run, what the gap is, and what the things are that really are probably going to influence how often you run. And from that, you can make a clear decision. If you've enjoyed the video, I'd really encourage you to check out my Dead Zone Fix book. If I say so myself, I'm really proud of it. I think it encompasses the whole philosophy I have behind not just what you do, but how you do it up here, not on my hat, in my head. I'm only wearing this hat because my light's so bright. It shines off my glasses. I'm trying to keep down. Anyway, so if you want, there's details below. It's the princely sum of £4.99, £5 if you round it up. And I think it's pretty good. But anyway, check it out. And you got any questions? Throw them into the comments or whatever you call them. And I'll get back to you. Bye till the next time.